Where Boris Johnson declared earlier today that he'd struck a new Brexit agreement with the European Union, a great new deal, in his words, that takes back control. But crucially, the deal still needs the approval of both the UK and European parliaments. And at Westminster, there is mounting uncertainty about the likelihood of MPs giving their approval when they meet in emergency session on Saturday. Northern Ireland's DUP, whose support Boris Johnson needs, have already rejected it. And Labour says that this deal is much worse for the UK than the one negotiated by Theresa May. Well, the deal says that if the UK leaves on the 31st of October, it will pay around £33 billion to the EU in a so-called divorce bill. It says EU and UK citizens will retain their residency and social security rights. And it says there will be a period until at least the end of December 2020 where the UK will still abide by the EU's rules to give time to negotiate new trading arrangements. But there is still deep concern in some quarters about the impact of the deal on Northern Ireland, especially among members of the Democratic Unionist Party. Our first report tonight on the deal itself is from our political editor, Laura Kuenssberg.
At speed, tucked under his arm in the red folder, perhaps the way Boris Johnson can take us out of the EU in a matter of weeks.
This is a great deal for our country, for the UK. I also believe it's a very good deal for our friends in the EU. And what it means is that we in the UK can come out of the EU as one united kingdom. It hasn't always been an easy experience for the UK. And now this is the moment for our parliamentarians to come together and get this thing done.
Why are you confident this can get through Parliament when it doesn't seem to be the case at home? And what on earth will you do if this falls on Saturday?
There is, as I say, a very good case for MPs across the House of Commons to express the democratic will of the people, as we've pledged many times to do, and to get Brexit done.
Easier said than done. This afternoon, it looked like he couldn't quite believe it.
How are you feeling, gentlemen?
It's only 7 days since the detailed talks really got going. Not even 100 days into Boris Johnson's time in office. And part one of his biggest job is complete.
We have a deal.
Words Boris Johnson might never have thought he would hear. But part two is next. Many MPs will deplore this deal. And it's not totally different to the one agreed by the former Prime Minister, Theresa May, who used to walk this red carpet. But EU leaders did finally accept that the backstop, the controversial border guarantee for Northern Ireland, had to go. There was enough political will in the end, so there was a way.
As things stand, we have a draft agreement between the European Union on the one hand and the British government on the other, and also creates a unique solution for Northern Ireland, recognising the unique history and geography of Northern Ireland, one which ensures that there is no hard border between north and south.
Let's rejoice in which a deal has been found.
But the numbers are achingly tight in Parliament. If it falls on Saturday, what then?
People are in favour of Brexit or against Brexit. It's really not the matter. This is now if we are going to have a deal or a no deal.
What happens if this doesn't pass through Parliament?
But I'm not in charge of the parliamentary ratification in Britain. That's the job of Boris.
But do you believe that it will?
I hope it will. I'm convinced it will. But it has to.
It has to, but if it doesn't?
Anyway, there will be no prolongation.
There will be no prolongation, no delay?
Could there be an extension?
No delay? Even if the deal falls? Not if the opposition's got anything to do with it.
And we believe the deal he's proposed is heading Britain in the direction of a deregulated society with a sell-off of national assets to American corporations. So, as it stands, we cannot support this deal and will oppose it in Parliament on Saturday.
Reaching a new deal, solving the political conundrums with Brussels, is by any measure a big political achievement. The EU has moved in ways that just a couple of weeks ago they swore publicly would simply never happen. But to reach there, Boris Johnson has of course had to compromise too. So he runs smack into the very next problem. Because a deal that works for this town might not work for Parliament, where there's a vital vote in 2 days' time. MPs who fear the consequences of the deal are talking, plotting perhaps to block it. not least Boris Johnson's supposed unionist allies.
In order to avoid trying to get an extension, he has been too eager by far to get a deal at any cost. And the fact of the matter is that if he held his nerve and held out, he would of course got better concessions which kept the integrity, both economic and constitutional, of the United Kingdom.
Other Brexiteers dangling their support.
I'm reserving my position on this because I really want to read what's in it, because we were told by the government throughout in discussions that certain concerns were being met within this agreement, and I just want to make sure that that's the case.
And the parties who want to stay in the EU will work together to stop it happening.
He's actually managed to negotiate something that is even worse for our economy than what Theresa May had put forward. We're talking about an act of economic vandalism which would be worse for the economy than the financial crash.
It's hard to imagine a deal that could be worse for Scotland. It's worse even than Theresa May's deal. It takes Scotland out of the EU, out of the single market, out of the customs union, all against our will.
If his political enemies win, Westminster will try to send Boris Johnson packing straight back to Brussels to ask for a delay. What would happen then? Is this the end of the road for a deal?
If this deal doesn't pass through Parliament, is this as far as the EU is prepared to go? Is this finally the final deal?
Visibly, not something they want to contemplate. Don't ask a question that doesn't arise, the negotiator said. It's a hypothesis, but one that might soon be true. Not what Boris Johnson or his apparent new friends want to think about tonight. They may all want to enjoy this while it lasts. Laura Kunsberg, BBC News, Brussels.
Well, with me is our Europe editor, Katya Adler, who of course has been following every twist and turn in this Brexit story. And I'm just wondering today, Katya, what your take is on the fact that they've agreed this deal. They're very relieved about that, and yet, how nervous are they about what's going on at Westminster in 2 days' time, and do they have a plan in case that is not going according to plan?
I thought the body language in there, Hugh, was really interesting, because if you have a look at Boris Johnson with the EU leaders, there was a lot of backslapping, there was lots of bonhomie, and it completely belies the fact that underneath those EU leaders are very sceptical when the Prime Minister said to them, I've got the numbers in Parliament to pass this deal. We got a whiff of that from Michel Barnier, the EU's chief Brexit negotiator. He said the Prime Minister says he has the numbers, and we must believe him. But believe him, they don't really. Up their sleeve, of course, is the possibility of another Brexit extension. EU leaders today were very coy about that. They're not enthusiastic about the idea, and they want to keep the pressure up on MPs to really focus their minds. But if this deal, like Theresa May's deal agreed with EU leaders, fails to get through the House of Commons, and if there were a request from the UK for another Brexit extension, then these EU leaders, after 3 years of Brexit process, 2 Brexit deals, are not going to turn around and say no to the UK if this extension would be for a general election, a second referendum, or a referendum on this deal.
Okay, Katya, again, thanks very much. Katya Adler there, our Europe editor, with the latest thoughts on what's going on. Well, now that Boris Johnson has agreed a deal here in Brussels, all eyes, as I've just mentioned, will be on Westminster, where MPs will gather on a Saturday for the first time in nearly 40 years to consider the agreement that he's achieved. Everyone seems to agree that the result in the Commons is expected to be very close. Our deputy political editor, John Pienaar, has been examining some of the detail.
Well, a plan that pleased everyone was never going to happen. Boris Johnson calls this one an excellent deal, though for Remainers it's the worst yet. It takes mainland Britain out of the EU trading bloc and allows the whole UK to strike trade deals which they fear would leave us worse off than in the EU. For the DUP and their staunch unionist allies, the big sticking point has been how to keep Northern Ireland inside those trade deals while avoiding customs checks north or south that could inflame old tensions. The DUP doesn't like it, but the new plan is for an east-west customs border. All north-south trade would be duty-free, no checks or taxes. But the DUP hates the plan for checks on all goods from the British mainland to Northern Ireland. Why? Well, take a car, say. Customs would need to know if it's for sale in Northern Ireland, no taxes to pay, or if it's heading for the Republic and into the EU, because if some components came from outside the EU, there could be taxes to pay to Brussels. So with Northern Ireland being treated differently, the deal accepts the need for agreement from its politicians.